My name is Tom. I suppose you could say my story is like many others you've heard. Marriage, happiness, betrayal. But to me, it was unique, raw, and shattering. I met Lisa in college. We were both studying at the University of Michigan, me for business, her for journalism. She was the type of girl who could light up a room just by walking into it. Her laughter was infectious, and her eyes had a way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world. We married young, right after graduation. It seemed like the perfect start to a life filled with promise and potential. After college, we moved to Chicago. I landed a job at a reputable financial firm downtown. It wasn't my dream job, but it paid well and had opportunities for advancement. Lisa started working at a local newspaper, writing features and human interest stories. We rented a small apartment in Lincoln Park, and for a while, life was good. We were both busy with our careers, but we made time for each other. Date nights, weekend getaways, lazy Sundays in bed. Those were the days I cherished the most now. As the years went by, I worked my way up in the company. Promotions came with long hours and more responsibilities, but also more money. Lisa was thriving in her career too. Her articles were getting noticed, and she was making a name for herself. We bought a house in the suburbs, a beautiful 2-story home with a big backyard. It was everything we had dreamed of. But looking back, I realized that's when things started to change. Lisa's job required her to attend a lot of events, galas, charity functions, press conferences. At first I went with her, but as my own work demands increased, I started staying home more. She assured me it was fine, that she understood. I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? We'd been through so much together. Then she met him. James was a photographer who often worked with the newspaper. I didn't think much of it when she first mentioned him. Just another colleague, another name in the long list of people she interacted with daily. But soon, his name started coming up more and more in conversations. "James said the funniest thing today," she would say. Or, "James thinks this would make a great story." I brushed it off. It didn't seem significant. I should have seen the signs. She started coming home later, always with some plausible excuse. Work ran late, or there was a last-minute interview. She was more distracted, spending more time on her phone, often smiling at messages. I asked her about it once, jokingly, and she laughed it off, saying it was just work stuff. The first real crack appeared on our 10th anniversary. I had planned a surprise weekend getaway to Napa Valley. I cleared my schedule, made all the arrangements, and even told her boss to ensure she'd have the time off. But when I told her, she seemed hesitant. She said she had an important event to cover and couldn't possibly take the time off. I was disappointed but tried to be understanding. Work was important to both of us. That weekend, she was supposed to be at a charity gala. I decided to surprise her there, thinking we could still spend some time together afterward. When I arrived, she wasn't there. I called her, but she didn't answer. I waited for a while, mingling awkwardly with people I didn't know, until finally, I decided to go home. She came back late, much later than she had said she would. Her hair was tousled, her makeup smudged. She looked startled to see me awake. "Where were you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. "At the gala, of course," she replied, avoiding my eyes. "I was there," I said quietly. "You weren't." She looked at me then, a flash of panic crossing her face. We moved to an after-party. You know how these things are." I wanted to believe her, God, I wanted to, but something in her voice, in her eyes, made me doubt. That night, as she slept beside me, I lay awake, my mind racing with suspicion and doubt. I told myself I was being paranoid. Dear viewers, more than 90% watch my content without subscribing. If you still have not subscribed, then I ask you to do so. For me, this is the best motivation to continue, that I had no reason to mistrust her. But the seed had been planted. The next few months were a blur of work and tension. Lisa and I were like strangers living under the same roof. I threw myself into my job, working longer hours, partly to avoid confronting what I feared was happening. I hoped that if I ignored it, it would go away. But it didn't. One evening I came home early, exhausted from a grueling day at the office. The house was quiet, too quiet. Lisa's car was in the driveway, but she didn't answer when I called her name. I found her in the study, hunched over her laptop, typing furiously. She looked up, startled, when I walked in. "Tom, you're home early," she said, closing the laptop quickly. Yeah, I finished up sooner than expected, I replied, trying to sound casual. What are you working on? Just an article, she said too quickly. Can I see? She hesitated, just for a moment, but long enough for me to notice. It's not ready yet, she said, standing up and stretching. How about we order in tonight? I'm too tired to cook. We ordered Chinese, but I barely tasted the food. My mind was elsewhere, turning over the possibilities, the lies. After dinner, while Lisa was in the shower, I went into the study and turned on her laptop. It was password protected. She had never done that before. My heart sank. The next day, I decided to take action. I called a friend of mine, Mark, who worked in IT security. I told him I needed his help with a personal matter. He came over that evening, and within minutes, he had bypassed the password on Lisa's laptop. I felt a pang of guilt as I watched him work, but my need to know the truth outweighed it. What I found confirmed my worst fears. There were dozens of emails between Lisa and James. They started out innocently enough, discussing work and stories, but as I read on, the tone changed. They were flirting, sharing personal details, making plans to meet outside of work. There were photos, too, of them together, laughing, touching. And then, the messages turned explicit. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. The room spun around me, and I had to sit down. Mark put a hand on my shoulder, offering silent support. I couldn't believe it. Lisa, my Lisa, the woman I had loved and trusted for so many years, was having an affair. That night, I confronted her. She came home late again, smelling of perfume and wine. I was waiting in the living room, the laptop open on the coffee table. When she saw it, her face went pale. Tom, I can explain, she started, but I cut her off. Don't. Just don't, I said, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. I've seen everything. She sank onto the couch, her head in her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. I never meant for this to happen. How long? I demanded. How long has this been going on? A few months, she admitted. It started as just a friendship, but then it got out of hand. I felt a wave of nausea. Why? Was I not enough for you? It's not that, she said, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to explain it. It just happened. I'm so sorry, Tom. I couldn't look at her. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built my life with, had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I stood up, my mind made up. I can't do this, I said. I need some time to think. I left the house, needing to get away from her, from the memories of us. I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind a whirlwind of anger, hurt, and confusion. I ended up at a hotel, checking in and collapsing on the bed. Sleep eluded me that night as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had come to this. In the days that followed, I moved into a friend's guest house. Lisa called and texted constantly, begging for forgiveness, asking for a chance to explain, to make things right. But I couldn't face her. I needed time to process, to figure out what to do next. I focused on my work, burying myself in projects and meetings. It was a welcome distraction from the turmoil in my personal life. My colleagues noticed the change in me, but I brushed off their concerns, saying I was just dealing with some personal issues. I wasn't ready to share the details of my betrayal with anyone. One evening, about a week after I had left, Lisa showed up at my friend's place. I wasn't surprised. She knew me too well. She looked tired, her eyes red from crying. She pleaded with me to come home, to talk, to try to work things out. Part of me wanted to, but the wound was still too fresh, too raw. Why should I believe anything you say? I asked, my voice tinged with bitterness. Because I love you, she said, her voice breaking. I made a terrible mistake, but I want to fix it. I want us to fix it. I looked at her, at the woman I had once adored, and felt a pang of longing for the life we had before. But I also felt anger, betrayal, and a deep sense of loss. I need more time, I said finally. I don't know if I can ever trust you again. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand, she whispered. But please, don't shut me out completely. Let's try to find a way through this, together. As she left, I felt a glimmer of hope mingled with my overwhelming sorrow. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that whatever happened, my life would never be the same again. The following weeks were some of the hardest of my life. I threw myself into my work even more, trying to numb the pain and avoid dealing with the mess that my marriage had become. My friend Dave was supportive, letting me stay as long as I needed, but I could see the concern in his eyes. Lisa kept reaching out. She sent long, heartfelt emails trying to explain her actions, to apologize. I read them all but rarely responded. Her words seemed hollow to me. It felt like she was grasping at straws, trying to justify the unjustifiable. I knew she was hurting too, but my pain blinded me to hers. One Saturday morning, I decided to clear my head with a long drive. I headed out of the city, taking winding country roads, with no particular destination in mind. The open road and the vast sky gave me a sense of freedom, a temporary escape from my problems. I ended up in a small town called Galena. It was quaint, with old-fashioned shops and friendly locales. I spent the day wandering around, talking to shop owners, and even bought a few trinkets. It was the first time in weeks that I felt a bit of peace. Back in Chicago, I knew I couldn't avoid the situation forever. I had to face Lisa and decide what to do about our marriage. One evening, I called her and asked if she could meet me at a coffee shop near our house. She agreed immediately. When I walked in, she was already there, sitting at a corner table, looking nervous. I sat down, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. "Tom, thank you for meeting me," she said finally, her voice shaky. I nodded, unsure of what to say. "I've read your emails," I began, "but I still don't understand why you did it." She took a deep breath. "I don't know if I can explain it in a way that makes sense," she said. "James was exciting. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. But it wasn't real. It was a fantasy, a way to escape the pressures of my life. I know that's no excuse, but it's the truth." "Did you ever think about me? About us?" I asked, my voice rising with emotion. "How could you throw everything away for a fantasy?" She looked down, tears filling her eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you, Tom. I was selfish and stupid. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you to give us another chance. I love you. I always have." Her words hit me hard. I had loved Lisa deeply, and part of me still did. But the trust had been shattered, and I didn't know if it could ever be repaired. "I don't know if I can do that," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of the situation pressing down on us. Finally, I stood up. "I need more time," I said. "I'm not ready to make any decisions yet." She nodded, wiping away tears. "I understand. Take all the time you need." Over the next few weeks, I continued to struggle with my emotions. Dave suggested I see a therapist, and reluctantly, I agreed. Dear viewers, I ask you to subscribe to the channel under this video. I will be very grateful to you. Dr. Miller was a kind, middle-aged woman with a calming presence. In our sessions, I poured out my anger, hurt, and confusion. She helped me understand that while Lisa's actions were inexcusable, it was important to consider what I wanted for my future. One day, after a particularly intense session, Dr. Miller asked me a question that stuck with me. "Tom, what would you need from Lisa to even consider rebuilding your marriage?" I thought about it long and hard. Trust was paramount, but it wasn't just about her proving she could be trusted again. I needed to understand why it happened and what we could do to ensure it never happened again. That evening, I called Lisa and asked if she could meet me at the house. She agreed, and we sat down in the living room, the tension between us palpable. "I've been seeing a therapist," I said, watching her reaction. She looked surprised, but nodded. "That's good, Tom. I think it could help both of us." Dr. Miller asked me what I would need to consider rebuilding our marriage, I continued. "And I've been thinking a lot about it. If we're going to try to move forward, we need to go to therapy together. We need to understand what went wrong and how to fix it." Lisa agreed without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said earnestly. "I want to make this right." We started attending couples therapy with Dr. Miller. The sessions were tough, forcing us to confront painful truths and deep-seated issues in our relationship. Lisa admitted that she had felt neglected as I became more consumed with my work. She felt lonely and unappreciated, which made her vulnerable to James's attention. It was hard to hear, but it made me realize that I had also played a role in the breakdown of our marriage. We began to communicate more openly, sharing our fears, hopes, and regrets. It wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to walk away, but slowly, we started to rebuild our connection. Lisa cut off all contact with James, and we set boundaries to rebuild trust. She gave me access to her phone and email, not as a way to control her, but to reassure me. One evening, after a particularly good session, we decided to go out for dinner. It was the first time in months that we had done something together outside of therapy. As we sat in the restaurant, talking and laughing, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. Time passed, and the wounds began to heal, though the scars remained. We continued therapy, both individually and as a couple. We worked hard to rebuild our relationship, brick by brick. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. We learned to appreciate each other again, to prioritize our marriage and make time for each other. One night, as we sat on the porch, watching the stars, Lisa took my hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving us another chance." I looked at her, the woman I had loved for so many years, and felt a sense of peace. "Thank you for fighting for us," I replied. Our journey wasn't over, but we were on the right path. We had faced the darkest moments of our marriage and come out stronger. I knew there would be more challenges ahead, but as long as we faced them together, I believed we could overcome anything. Life went on, with its ups and downs, but we faced it as a team. Lisa's career continued to thrive, and I found a new passion for my work, balancing it better with my personal life. We made new memories, creating a stronger foundation for our future. Years later, as I look back on that tumultuous time, I realize it taught me valuable lessons about love, forgiveness, and resilience. Betrayal is devastating, but it doesn't have to be the end. With hard work, honesty, and a willingness to heal, even the deepest wounds can be mended. Lisa and I are not the same people we were before the affair. We are wiser, more aware of each other's needs, and more committed to our relationship. It took a long time, but we found our way back to each other, and for that, I am grateful every day.